Hey, Melissa, how are you?
I'm good, Holly. How are you?
Good. We are recording. So we'll just wait, but I will not have my camera on. I've got like a strawberry blonde afro thing going on, and it's not something, it's like if Don King had strawberry blonde hair. It's a very similar resemblance, but he pulls it off much better than I do. So
Oh,
I
that's
figured I would spare our viewers. But
that's
now
like
they have the visual.
what? What was
they
that last?
they see the docile former banker in the photo, and then they're trying to imagine me with the afro, and
Yeah,
they're
it
getting a
doesn't.
cocktail or a drink of some sort or chocolate, whatever works. So, but yeah, I said to the dog walk. Well, I texted the dog walker like reminder. I have a Zoom. I will not be on camera, but I am the one speaking. So, please do not knock on the door. Just take my dog and run.
Yeah, and Holly, I'm restricted on Facebook, so I'm trying to figure out how to fix it, and that derailed me from doing a lot yesterday, and I didn't have a chance to try to fix it till this morning, and I've been spending a few hours trying to fix it, and
Oh, that stinks.
yeah, yeah, and it's all because of some of the wording I used
Yeah.
does not comply, which I didn't know.
Well, they change the rules frequently anyway, Melissa. So you could have been complying and then they changed their mind with algorithms and whatnot. So,
Yeah, so I guess I can use the word aging instead of implying more than that.
oh Lord. Okay. So we are getting ready for senior living 101. Um, and I am Holly McDonald. I am a contributor for Club 62 Plus. Thank you to the always effervescent Melissa Kukuza for inviting me to be part of the team. And today, as you and I have discussed ad nauseum, Melissa, is the challenges with senior living communities. And I think we might need to make this a two-parter. But this is a recording for those that really want to just get information, because when you've been faced with the situation, it is overwhelming. And I say that as someone who's in the business. When I went through it personally with my grandparents, and I had all the resources that many of you don't have yet, you'll have them with Melissa. But I was totally overwhelmed, and I know people. So, with that being said, I think the key thing, and Melissa, I think you'd agree with senior living, is that most of the time people wait too late. And I would say 90% of the time, their move to senior living is precipitated most likely by a fall or an illness. And instead of doing things when you want to, or picking the place that best suits your needs, often it's dictated to you. And for some of you, you will have no say whatsoever, because you could be unconscious, you could be completely impaired, you could be at the end stages of your life. There are many things. So, with that being said, let's pretend you're the 10% and start from there. And then I will touch on things. And Melissa, I will probably miss something that we've talked about. So please feel free to interrupt me or questions.
Yeah.
So the first thing is that you should be thinking about senior living when you don't need it, when you can't reach for that, upper cabinet any longer. You get nervous with the boiling pot of water, things like that. When gosh, maybe I've got like 4 or 5 years left in my home. The first thing I would tell you is that, and that's not 4 or 5 years living, but if the lawn is too much, snow removal, if you're in states, well, Melissa gets it more than me, thank goodness. But it's, and you can keep it in Connecticut, Melissa. But it's the but you know, the general upkeep of the home. I know when I'm now going on a third water heater in my condo. I've been here 25 years. God, I feel old. I know it's time. I don't want to be here for the fourth water heater. And so the first thing is when you know you're probably coming into that stretch where it's your last few years at that particular home, and you will be forced to make a decision then. The first thing I can tell you is pare down. This generation and the subsequent generations do not want your things. They do not want the big hulking china cabinet. They do not want tons of photos and frames. They might not even want your artwork. They definitely do not want your furniture, even if it's antique. They do not want your collections. So all of those years that you have spent buying books or buying other collectibles, for the most part, this generation does not want them. And so the first thing you have to do is really see, we acquire so many things in our life, we don't even realize it until we try to go through it. And that can be overwhelming. And sometimes that can take a few years just to pare down. So the first thing I would recommend, Melissa, is someone's kind of, when they're like me, they don't want to be there for the fourth water heater. They've already been through three. That you decide, okay, what do I need to do? And for me, COVID was a great thing when I realized, I think we all realized when we were staring at our walls, and being inside for so long, what did we really want in our lives and to be surrounded with? And I realized I had a storage unit for what? For when I'd eventually move, and that was extra money. And my taste had changed by the time I had put things in the storage unit to save, including 3,000 books, because I am a bibliophile. But I realized that I don't have kids. I have a niece and nephew. They're going to inherit enough stuff because they're the only grandchildren on both sides. They're only niece and nephew on both sides. And so they're going to inherit a lot. And I thought about that. And I thought about what my clients face and how heartbroken they are when someone doesn't want their collection, or they don't want the china set from their great grandmother. They don't understand. And so I spent a year during COVID because, believe it or not, an outdoor storage, well, it was indoor climate control, but essentially no one was going to the storage unit. I had the place to myself. And I went religiously a couple times a week to just take even a little bit, but I'd spend maybe an hour going through things. And I eventually wound up donating more than 3,000 books. And I now limit what comes into my home. And so when you start paring down, also see what people do want. Maybe they've had their eye on that one piece of furniture from an ancestor. Maybe they want, like my mom, she made handkerchiefs. And I sent them out to all of my cousins because I had received many of them when she passed in 1999. You only need so many handkerchiefs. But what I did to the grandchildren and great grandchildren of hers that wanted them, I mailed them out during COVID and said, you said you wanted one of my mom's handkerchiefs. That way they didn't go to Goodwill or whatever organization you prefer going to. But that was a way that it was a sentimental thing that if, heaven forbid, I passed and my sister or niece and nephew needed to hire a cleanout crew, I wouldn't want those getting bulldozed or taken wherever. Excuse me, I talk a lot, so I drink my chocolate milk. So next thing is that you have to decide what's really important to you. So what do you like about where you currently live? What are the amenities that you're looking for? So for instance, for many seniors, and I think Melissa, I think we have a nutritionist coming on soon, that food is a very important thing for everyone. But the senior population, sometimes that's the socialization they get. That's the thing they look forward to. Me, I can't live without my coffee every morning. For me, it would be good coffee. If the place had junk coffee, I certainly wouldn't move there, no matter how nice it was. So you have to think about what's important, right? And so is Food, very important to you. And then do you have dietary restrictions? I am a vegetarian. And so, and I've been a vegetarian before it was cool to be a vegetarian since the 90s. And, but I can tell you that while there's many, many things that people have adapted, it's still pasta primavera, which I can't even think about eating because I've had so many plates of it, because it was used to be the only thing on the menu for vegetarians. But pasta primavera or a Beyond Burger might be a restaurant's only contribution to vegetarian. And senior living communities are like that as well. Or they'll say we have fish, and it's like, well, I don't eat those either as a vegetarian. And I don't want you to load me with tons of sugar with a cereal or a Danish, because that doesn't count. So I just moved a client in the community and checking the reviews, and reviews are something I might get to in this one or the next one, Melissa. I'm writing it down, but I need you to remind me too, is that they chose this place because of the reviews online and the vegetarian food that they were bringing into the community more and more. And as I order my clients' food every day, there is a vegetarian option for dinner that's not the same. Thank goodness it's not pasta primavera. She could have a Beyond Burger if she wanted, but she could have, there's 4 different types of pasta. They have all kinds of healthy dishes. And so if I was considering a senior living place now, that certainly would be on my bucket list. Because one of the reasons some people like to move into senior living communities is they don't want to cook ever again. They're tired of making dinner. They're tired of cleaning the bathroom. They are tired. They don't want to have to do laundry anymore. Laundry is a stress reliever for me, but I hate doing dishes. And so it doesn't make sense, right? One is washing clothes, one's washing dishes. I like the clothes. I don't like the dishes. Who knows? But it's that it might be a motivator for someone, right? And so I guess I should just get to reviews while I'm thinking about it, Melissa, is please do not just go by reviews. Reviews can be easily manipulated. And I say that for any business. Anyone can throw up a review. And I can tell you, I've seen a few places recently where they strongly encouraged, we'll use that phrase, their employees to leave reviews about their the community. And so for one community I looked at, it was the person and then a family member, and say they had a unique name like yours, Melissa. So McDonald you can kind of get away with, but I don't think there's not too many Cucuzas out there. And so say there was a Melissa Cucuza who's the head of resident life for XYZ community, and then you see Mary Cucuza. What are the odds that Mary is probably related to Melissa? And so, and you see it like on the same day or the day after, or you see all the reviews at once to combat maybe a bad review. So please do not go by reviews alone, unless they're very specific, like this one with the community I just moved a client into that talked about the food, but this one was specific to vegetarians. Yeah, could have been made up, but I don't think someone would put that much detail into it. So do not be lured by social media reviews, because it's just like when you're first dating someone, you always put your best forward. You put on all the outfits they've never seen you in before. You don't get to the sweatpants part of a relationship, at least for 3 months. So you're not seeing them in their sweatpants. Next thing is that as you're cleaning things up and you're deciding before you get to your 4th water heater, that, you know what, I need to start visiting communities. How should I go about this? So there are companies, and I have to be very careful because I don't want to be sued. But I am not a fan of companies that search, because they will give you the line, Melissa, XYZ company. There's no fee for you, but we will help guide you. While there is no fee for you, there are 2 things that are a problem with that. The first is that they are paid different amounts of money by different communities. So if, say, we've got to start picking on XYZ. So say Melissa likes ABC community, and I work for one of those search companies, or I have my own search company. and I pretend that I'm independent of those companies, which is not true. And Melissa, you're so in the ABC village, and you love it. And they've got a dog park, and they have really good coffee, and they have your favorite types of food. And you're like, yes, this is Melissa 24/7. I'm in for it. But ABC company does not pay me the type of commission that's the LMNOP pays me. So I start telling you things that aren't so great about ABC, because I know with LMNOP, I might get double the commission. I don't have to disclose that to you, that I get paid more for one than the other. So think about it. If you have this person on, the first thing off the bat, they will never tell you, hey, I get paid so much more by this one type of organization with senior living communities in every state or whatever than that one. Red flag, red flag. Other one is that I think many people know what a CRM system is. It's a customer relationship management system that people put your data into. And Melissa, we might have one for Club 62. I don't know. But it's where we might keep emails, or we might keep how many people attended an event or whatnot. Almost all of my clients in my marketing company, they use this in some way, shape, or form. What I found out with some of the communities I work with is that many of these organizations, they will buy the CRM systems for a community group. So say that big organization that Melissa's a fan of, the ABC company, and I'm with a certain search company, and I pay for ABC CRM system. Even if I never talk to my search company, if I attended an event at ABC and my information's in there, that community already gets a cut because they have sold my information to that search organization. That does not have to be disclosed. And the last thing is it takes away from your negotiating power. So in my situation, my grandparents were not part of the 10%. My grandfather fell a few years ago in January. He had a traumatic brain injury. His brain actually shifted as much as it could go without killing him instantly. It caused a ton of problems, including what I call Alzheimer's fast forward. That's not a medical term, but he had Alzheimer's. There was a lot of things that go along with that, but just safe to say that his Alzheimer's went from maybe a 2-3 to close to 10 to terminal. And he could not go home. And so there was a person in my family, not a relative, we'll just leave you to your imagination who that could be, that began filling out things online without permission, giving the wrong information about my grandparents, saying that they had X amount of money, which they did not. So you can imagine all the bougie places, Melissa, I hope we can say bougie on this call. All the bougie places started reaching out to that person's, my grandfather's decision maker. And that's how they found out that their information was sold. So the problem is that one of the online surveys that this person filled out went to one of those search companies. So when I was working to get my grandfather admitted into a community, I was told that he was already with this search company and that I could not negotiate his entrance fee. This person never reached out to us, never tried to help us, but because they own that site to get more information, that's all they were doing. They weren't signing up for anything. And I'm sure it was in very small print, and this person's not that bright, so they didn't read it. My grandfather, I could not negotiate on their behalf, where normally you can negotiate, because if you're negotiating on your own, they don't have to pay that person. So what happened is that person and their company got $3,000 for my grandfather moving into this community for nothing. And then when he was moved into memory care, they were paid again another $5,000. That is $8,000 is a lot. I could have negotiated that. But then to add insult to injury, Melissa, we thought we would need greater security for him because he was what's called an eloper, which means you like to escape. And I had reached out to a friend because I couldn't find a phone number for this one place. And they're limited, these places that are secure. We are not allowed to call them lockdown anymore. But they're for people where their mental health is exacerbated by dementia, Alzheimer's, or might be existing mental health issues. And so I called a friend and said, gosh, do you have so-and-so, the executive director for this particular place? Her cell phone number, I can't find it, and I need to talk to her immediately. Now, Melissa, if I had looked for it for a few more hours, I would have found it. But I thought this person was my friend. And she said, oh, yeah, here it is. And I said, thanks so much. And don't you know, I found it while I was literally calling her. So I called this person and I said, we need to make an appointment with my grandfather's decision maker. We went there the next day and it was a perfect fit for his needs because he was end stage. And I said, great. Because I'm doing this on my own and you don't have to pay me, I want the entrance fee waived. And do you know what she said, Melissa? So-and-so, my so-called friend, had called her to take credit for me calling her. She said, Holly, I can't negotiate with you because if your grandfather moves here, I owe her $10,000 for the referral. $10,000. So I called my quote unquote friend and the president of the company she worked for, who I also thought was a friend. And I said, listen, you know what I've been through. You're not getting Jack Diddley. You gave me a phone number because I was desperate, which I found while I was on the phone with her. And do you know what they both said, Melissa? $10,000 is too much money. So you know what we did? We wound up not moving my grandfather to that community, which he probably could have benefited greatly from, because we lost the negotiating power of $10,000. So in a span of 5 months, my grandfather, $8,000 in negotiating power for the community he was at, and then the community that he could have died peacefully at, we lost a negotiating power of $10,000. That's how big this game is. When people say we're not paid commission, blah, 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 by you, they never disclose they're paid by the facility. And depending on the facility, the pay range is very different, as you saw with the 3 examples from my grandfather. So that's my cautionary tale. Next thing is that hopefully if you're in that 10% and you are making your decisions, the next thing is you have to be realistic about your budget. What do your finances look like? So I'd get my financial advisor, I would get my accountant, and again, I recommend a certified elder law attorney, someone that does this all the time, that can help you with the contract of the facility to everything with what you will need. And eventually, what would happen if you need 24/7 hour care, memory care, or in my grandfather's case, this secure facility, if your mental health had declined that much, especially if Alzheimer's dementia runs in your family. It could happen. It's 50-50 shot that you might need that type of facility. How much can you afford? And so I would, before you start looking at places, right, make sure that your budget matches your vision. So what was that show, Melissa? Was it Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous? Remember that guy on the boat? And was it Caviar Dreams and Champagne Nights or something like that? Like, if you are a person that it's more a 6-pack of a generic beer that you can afford versus the Veuve Clicquot, please make sure you're not looking at the Veuve Clicquot places, even though Veuve Clicquot is very good. They should be a sponsor, Melissa. So if you want to make sure that you are prepared. And one thing I will tell you, and Melissa, you know this from your experience, you will be shocked by what you have to pay. There are places that I have seen that are dumps, pardon my language, for $5,000 a month, and you get a minimum. I've seen gorgeous places for $20,000 a month that turn out to be dumps. They're gorgeous dumps. But you have to decide. You don't know how long you're going to live. And so you don't know what the future holds for you unless you're in that 90%. Maybe you've been told. But I have a client, a different client now, that they were totally fine. They were hauling in cat litter better than me in their late 80s until late last year. They had an incident, and now their health has precariously declined. And when I first took them on as a client, I figured that they had over 7 years of comfortable living left. Not scientific, but just with money. And that by then they would have been in their mid to late 90s. And with their dementia, they might, that's usually end of life for dementia. You usually have anywhere between 6 to 10 years, sometimes shorter, like my grandfather, sometimes a little longer, but usually not too much longer. This person has had a series of incidents, Melissa, some of them you're familiar with, and now we're less than 2 years of spending all their money because they've had traumatic incidents where I spent $200,000 on this individual this past summer because of the need for 24/7 care, greater secure facility, things like that. Obviously, our outlook has changed dramatically for what's happening with them. We've had Bruce Sham speak. Bruce and I have a client that they were given a year and a half to live. And so we put them in a facility that they could afford. They refused to not have their 100-pound black lab with them. He's so cute, but he's a big boy. And so we needed to find a place that would support that because this person could not take care of them. They wound up paying more for pet care and dog walkers than the actual rent of the facility itself. Well, do you know what happens, Melissa? They finally get the care they need for themselves and their animal. The animal is no longer on death's door. And this person has improved so dramatically, she no longer has a timestamp on her. But we've gone through a ton of money. And so this person has had to move to something more affordable and could not take her dog with her. So one of her children has taken the dog. The dog is allowed to visit infrequently, but she was spending up to $5,000 a month on pet sitters to take care of the dog 24/7 because she could not. So you have to decide what's important to you. Are you willing to spend all of your money on something like that, on something like to be close to your kids or to be in an area like Melissa? I'm sure the dead of winter, you and I, when it's 4 o'clock and it's dark as you know what out, I could go for Florida. I could go for California or Hawaii, but my budget probably would not last long. I might not have to reinstall another water heater, and it's because I'm living in my car at some point. So you have to make sure that your budget aligns with your vision. Don't look at the places if they're not in your budget. It's cruel to do. That being said, as you get ready and you have an idea, you've cleaned out, you've pared down things, you've decided who gets what, and you're kind of more in line. And then you start thinking about what's important to you. Is it the coffee? I have another client, they're in a place and they're carnivore. So it's funny, they have a vegetarian power of attorney. I order them filet mignon 3 times a week because that's one of their meal choices. And they grew up never being able to have that cut of beef. And I gag every time I do the check mark, but that's what my client wants and that's what they get. And guess what? They're loving having filet mignon 3 times a week. Well, good for them. They can afford it. So that's what we do for them. But once you decide what's important and you meet with your advisors and you find out what you can really afford, the next thing you do, and this is morbid, but if you eventually would have to go on Medicare, Medicaid, and I know you've had specialists on about Medicaid and Medicare, and I know we'll have more. With Medicaid, you can only have so much money, and you go into a Medicaid-approved facility. So for many of them, they require you to, if you can have your funeral arrangements in advance, that they're done. Some communities won't accept you that are not Medicare, Medicaid, that they will not accept you unless you have your funeral arrangements in place. And so it may also shock you to know what a funeral costs, whether it's cremation, which is usually cheaper, to funeral, it can range anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000 on the low end to an actual burial can now be, Melissa, up to $25,000. So I'll pick on my grandparents again, because I've been in this business for so long, even when I was a banker. I had said, because I didn't see the future, but I know what was going to happen, right? That, believe it or not, people do not get along suddenly when everyone passes away or when money's involved. And I just had this vision that if their funeral was not taken care of, that it would wind up me getting out the credit card at the funeral home saying, okay, well, I'll take care of it, but then I'll be reimbursed. So please do not do that to your family. It is not an easy thing. And if you can't do it, hire someone like me. Melissa, I've been hired just to organize funerals. So the person doesn't have to think about it. There is nothing to be ashamed of with that. Me and many, many people like me will do that for you. And your attorney can usually recommend someone that way they do all the planning for you. You write the check, but you don't have to deal with it. And it's not a topic for everyone. But pay for that funeral in advance because you lock in on today's prices and you don't, and then it's done and it can't be taken back from you. So with my grandparents, Melissa, my grandparents, it was right before 9/11. They prepaid their funeral. And you know that it was just over $10,000 that they put aside. My grandmom actually got a refund for my grandfather's funeral because they had locked in at such cheap pricing that I believe the casket would have been 3 times more than what she paid originally. The flowers, there are all these things that a funeral director will tell you. But then also she was provided assistance by the Veterans Administration because my grandfather was a war veteran and she wound up getting some money back from that. And that's another thing we'll have to put on the list, Melissa. We'll have to go over veterans benefits sometime. But the funeral is a big thing. We could have just an hour on what I was able to get for my grandfather's funeral. That really helped my grandma. So put that aside and make sure you pay for everything. So this client that I told you about that has been through so many things, we thought she had 7 years. Now it's a lot less. I checked when I took on her case. I checked the burial, and first, yes, I checked the receipts and everything. It looked like she had everything set up, but she had a very serious incident a couple months ago with sepsis, and sepsis is a very scary thing up close. And when I called the funeral home to say this could be it, they said we actually kept a note because she had pre-planned back in 2004. And in her 60s, she was a very, very smart woman. And they said she paid for everything, Melissa, but the opening of the grave. She thought her relatives would want to pay for that. I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay for that. When you think everything's done. And so what is crazy is that wound up costing $3,000 in 2024 dollars. Had she done it and bitten the bullet back in 2004, the funeral director told me, they wrote it down, it would have been $700 because her family had had the plot since 1927. So it's one of those things, make sure you do that. So now we get to the fun part. And Melissa, I know it's, we're 32 minutes in, so I know we maybe have about 13 more minutes. So the fun part is, even if your heart is set on ABC Village or LMNOP, look at least 5 to 6 places. Because even if after those visits, your heart is still set on either one of those options, you know what is out there, you know how expensive it is, you know the amenities, and maybe you see some things at one community that you wonder if they could do the same thing at your community that you want. Do they do day trips? Do they have transportation? If you don't bring your car with you, I will tell you with many of these places, eventually you will give up your car because you won't need it. Some of them, I call them like cruise ships, Melissa, where they literally have everything under the sun. They have 6 different restaurants. They have the hair salon, they have the indoor pool, they have yoga and Pilates, and you don't ever have to leave. And it's literally with next to a shopping center. So you could walk there if you needed to do your shopping. And so, look at the cruise ship, but then maybe you don't have to look at the Pinto, but you want to look at something in between to see what is available. Try the food. Don't tell them what you like, because they might make it just special for you. Try the food. The next thing is visit more than once. Visit during the hours they give you, and then visit on a weekend. None of these places, I don't care how nice they are, ever have enough staff on the weekend. Never. Go on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon when they're usually the least staffed. See how they run then. Because people usually don't have their emergencies at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. I can tell you in my experience, all of my clients, it has seemed to be Friday nights, Melissa, or Sunday mornings. And so it's usually when not all the people are there, right? And that's just human nature. It's where we are right now in our economy, that people don't want to work at those times. And I don't blame them. I don't want to work on Sunday mornings. And so make sure you're visiting them at odd hours. Next thing is negotiate. Never, ever, ever accept the first offer. Make sure you're not on one of those lists like we talked about. So Melissa loves ABC versus LMNOP. She's narrowed her decision down. She tells ABC she's considering that, but she does not want to pay the entrance fee, or she wants money knocked down from the entrance fee. So you want to do that because that is how many of them get paid. They get paid by the entrance fee and flat fees, kind of like a broker or a banker that gets fees for your annual fee, a closing fee with the loan, things like that. I will tell you that one of the best times to shop, and again, it's being morbid, is after flu season and the holidays. Many people die. They hold out until the holidays for their loved ones, and they die in January. And with many of these places, they have to rely on something called a census. And a census means heads in the bed. And so if Melissa's looking at ABC and she goes to them in May versus January, there will be a difference in offers. I can guarantee it. Because they need to get that census up to keep getting their bonuses. I'm giving you inside baseball here. And so, Melissa, is this making sense? Am I jibber jabbering too much?
No,
Okay.
it's very informative and revealing a lot of things that people just don't know. And I've learned a lot. And some of it is disturbing, really disturbing. And, by you sharing this information on negotiating, I don't think anybody thought that was even an option.
Yeah, you can always negotiate. Doesn't mean they'll accept it, but that's why you always have a plan B. So if Melissa's looking at January, it's also because people will not put grandma or grandpa, and I'm just being dead honest, in a facility during the holidays. So sometimes you might have openings. Never accept the first order offer. Remember, I've now said that a second time. There is always negotiating power. Never, ever pay the full fee for entrance unless you're desperate, or unless it's a hot time like May or June, where, and I'm going to be very frank, Melissa, and it's sad, but families do not want to have to deal with their elderly relative over the summer. They want to be able to go on vacation. It's the truth. The next thing is you can also have a tryout period called a respite. So Melissa, if say I'm living with you and I'm your loved one and you need a break, I've seen people do it. I had a friend do it just because she had to deal with she was dealing with the divorce. She cared for a parent, but she also had 3 young children. And it was the first time they weren't having Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas with mom and dad. And so that's a very challenging time. It's stressful enough, but Halloween they got through, but the Thanksgiving and Christmas, she placed her parent in a facility for 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, just to get the intangibles done. Christmas shopping, all of that. And it can be Hanukkah, it could be whatever. It could be you just want to break. But her mom, I should say her parent loved it. They were getting different attention. They were being around people their own age. Well, they love their grandchildren. 3 little ones under the age of 6 is a lot. It's exhausting just talking about it. So that respite also led my friend to eventually move her mother there, and her mother approved because she had already lived there for 2 weeks. I've had other people do that, and they realized that that ABC village that Melissa likes so much is not so ABC awesome. It was the first 2 days, but then they began to treat her like a regular person, right? It's kind of like the relationship. You get in the sweatpants mode very quickly, and they showed you their sweatpants, and it was not pretty. There's lots of holes, lots of holes. And so you have to figure that out. The next thing is that you have to be realistic. I know for my grandmother, it was very challenging because my grandmother, she's 93. She's smart as a whip. Hopefully she doesn't watch this, Melissa, because then I have to say the phrase that she's right about a lot of things, which when it's even worse than your own mother, when your grandmother's right, like almost all the time, is very frustrating. But my grandma wanted to go into a 2-bedroom, which they could not afford long term when I did their budget. And so I had to move them into a 1-bedroom. And that was a big obstacle. They were used to, for many years, having their own rooms and their own bathrooms. That's what happens when you get married and you go home to a 3-bedroom, 1-bath row home, and your mother-in-law lives with you the first 25 years. I'm probably getting too personal, but they like space. After those first 50 years of marriage, they earned having their own bedroom and bathroom. And that was hard for them again, to share a bedroom and to share a bathroom. And she had to get used to that more than him. And so make sure that you go over that budget and you really stick to it, because you're still going to have to buy amenities like clothing, like you're going to want to get your hair cut. You're going to want to get your nails done sometime. Maybe you want to try that fancy spa at the place. Maybe you want to go off your meal plan. Maybe you want to make some of your own meals. Even though you're tired of cooking, you like making your own coffee, and you have coffee and a bagel every morning, which you don't need then to buy into the breakfast plan. So you have to think about that and what you can afford. And then the next thing is timing. So what I would do in looking at any of these places, Melissa, is I would look at the census. Ask them directly, because I think they'll be shocked that you know that term. What is your census? If they tell you that their census is less than 85%, you have negotiating power, but I'd also be alarmed. Why? And how long has it been at that? Now, during COVID, it was easy to explain. We had one community for the one law firm I work with where there were 13 deaths in 3 months. Because they were in a government-run facility that had way too many people, and things happened. But if you have that, I'd be concerned. The second most important question is, what is the tenure of your staff? So where I live in southeastern Pennsylvania, I can tell you that most communities, it's disturbing to me that they change executive directors. I would say it's unusual if someone's there more than 2 years. So imagine if you're running a company, and these are multi-million-dollar companies, each community, right? Even if they roll up to what I call the mothership, you have all of those communities, Melissa, and you have a leadership change every 12 to 18 months, because either their census is not good, they get poached from somewhere else, they get run down, tired. That scares me. But I also want to know not only about your leadership team, but what about the caretakers? How long do they work there? So Oh, they need to be a sponsor because I plug them there, but there's this one group that I really, really like. And when I grow up, I want to live at one of their communities where I love that they pay their people a premium for retention. They pay them more than the industry average. Their turnover is less than 4% with housekeeping, caregiving, and culinary staff. That is unheard of. Where my grandmother is now, there have been times where they were served dinner from a very well-known convenience store with red and white lettering that begins with W and ends with A, because there were no kitchen staff that showed up that night, or they were poached. There's a community right by my grandmother that they had a walkout by all of the employees, including RNs. There's another community not far from me where they lost 3/4 of their staff within a week because they were poached for more than $2 an hour. Well, if you're someone making minimum wage and you're offered $2 more an hour and a sign-on bonus, that's life-changing. You almost can't blame them for taking it. Like, you don't want them to leave your loved one, but you get what you pay for, right? We all want everything to be as inexpensive as possible, but as nice as possible, but you can't have it both ways. So if you want that place that's been consistent with pricing, with my grandmom's place that she's in, they don't have fresh fruit any longer. They have canned fruit to save money. That is, and I'm sure our person, the dietitian, will tell us, it's one of the worst things you can do for seniors is any kind of canned food, the sodium and whatnot. So Melissa, I know I've kind of left people waiting and we'll have to do a senior living 102. But is there anything that I didn't mention about this initial process? I know some of it was doom and gloom, but hopefully this helps people get in the mindset of things to be aware of, knowing that they have the power to kind of choose their own destiny as much as possible, but also the things they need to start doing now before they get to that fourth water heater. Is there anything that I missed before we get into the nitty-gritty about senior living communities?
No, I can't think of it, Holly, because you offered so many different things that I've never heard before. That is so valuable. And I think that most people are just influenced by going into some of these continuums of care or assisted livings and just seeing how it looks on the face value.
Yeah.
But what is really those other behind the scenes things that are important, like just tasting the food randomly, not letting them know your favorite dish, or the turnover, because that all affects the quality of life, and to not just trust the reviews. I mean, is there a better way to really understand the differences in some of the communities outside of reviews, that where people might it help them to make a decision of some locations other than how pretty it is?
Yeah. Well, one big thing is they have state inspections. And so to get to see the state inspection, but every one of these places, because they serve food, they have what's the restaurant or the health food inspection. So there are communities near me that are like these cruise ships. They're gorgeous. But then you find out that they have 10 to 12 health code violations for the food. Now, one place I didn't get so upset about, the employee had a container of their own food in the community refrigerator. I don't know, like, obviously it's wrong because it was written up. Am I getting upset about that, or that they ran out of paper towels in the kitchen the one time? No. But if they don't wash their hands, if there are communities where they're not keeping the food at the proper temperature, where people can get sick. This one community near me failed their health inspection. They were not permitted to serve food until it was cleaned up. So what happens in that case? You pay all that for a meal plan. They're not disclosing, none of these places disclose their health inspection. So that is something I'd be aware of. But then I would ask, and it's a great question, Melissa, for reminding me. But the place I just moved a client from, they had 4 moves within 3 weeks, 4 people moving out of the community. And so it wound up, we all kind of had the same thing. Things going quote unquote missing, cameras being turned off in the rooms that we had all set up. And they did it so well, we still can't figure out how they did it. A person being assaulted in one of the facilities. And that happened at a facility near me where I didn't even know until I considered bringing someone there. And I was notified by a member of law enforcement that there had been an assault that led to a person's death in memory care. And so I think that while nowhere's perfect, obviously, when you have those types of things, you need to know. And then I think you can always tell when you visit a facility, and particularly on the weekends where they're not showing you their prettiest selves. What are people doing? What are the activities for them? Is it just bingo? Which is fine, but I think people get tired of bingo every once in a while. How many staff are on? How do the people look? Are they lined up in their wheelchairs by the door for the food? And that's fine because that'll happen. But are they maybe lined up an hour and a half early because that's all they have to do? Those types of things scare me, Melissa. I would tell you at my grandma's community, on weekend days, they can line up even 2 hours in advance just so that they have each other to talk to. And isn't this why you formed Club 62, was to combat the loneliness? Like, it's, to me, just observe how the employees act. It's kind of like when you go into a restaurant, it always makes me nervous when I'm in a restaurant and people are fighting, the employees, because it scares me what they're going to do to my food. So I think part of it's kind of like a vibe, if that makes sense. That's the unscientific, but you can see if people are happy or unhappy. So those are things I can say to help you. And I think one thing we need to advocate for our loved ones, and I just did this recently in my own community where I live in Chester County, Pennsylvania. I serve on the Department of Aging Advisory Council. And I just had a conversation with one of our county commissioners about particularly this one location where there was an assault that resulted in the death of a resident by a fellow resident in a memory care unit. And they weren't aware of it. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting or very helpful, and it's a fine line, but to have the communities that are currently under state investigation or have failed in health inspections where you didn't have to go rooting for it, that you actually found it quickly. And it's not to disparage anyone, but Melissa, money talks. And if people know, oh my gosh, ABC failed their health inspection 3 different times because employees weren't washing their hands, they weren't keeping foods at certain temperatures, things like that, I am sure they wouldn't fail another health inspection again if that happened. So I don't know if that answers your question, but also CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, they have ratings of facilities. Again, it's not easy to find. You really have to dig into it. And some of those are up to 2 years old, but at least it might give you an idea. And so like where my grandmother's at that I'm not enthralled about is that there is an individual that actually made the newspaper. I sound so old, but the news, I guess I should say, that he was in charge of a facility during COVID that was a veteran-run facility in Pennsylvania, where they had more than 50 deaths due to COVID in a short period of time. And there was a lot attached to that, where some of these were preventable. They were putting COVID positive people in with healthy people and not telling the family of the healthy people. And shockingly, not shockingly, many of those people died. And so I am not a fan of that. And I have to be careful. I don't want to be sued, but I'm not stating anything that's not true. So hopefully, Melissa, that answers the question, is that just be really careful and check out the people that are running the facility. And where have they been? So I will tell you that the person that ran my grandmother's facility during COVID, which they were not good at what they did, and there were a lot of issues. They have now been at 3 different facilities and are now on their 4th since September of 2020. That to me is very, very scary. And where they've been have not had a good track record.
Yeah, like, I mean, for the staff too. Like,
Yes.
is it possible to understand how the staff have been rated at a facility overall, or does that not really exist?
No, it doesn't exist. And, they have privacies and protections. But I will tell you one thing that I would ask about a facility, because I've been shocked about this, is how often do they perform criminal background checks and drug test? Because with hospice in many of these communities, you have access to narcotics. And if someone has never been drug tested or they don't have a criminal background check, how do you know this person? And so I know one community I had a client at, they said that, like many employers, they do the drug test the first time and one time only. They do the background check one time only. At another community, which, I would have loved to have lived in this community until I heard, it's beautiful. It looks like a chateau in France. They believe in protecting their employees' privacy. So they do not run any kind of background or credit check, or they don't drug test because they trust them. Well, I don't trust anybody. And when say you have an addiction and you have access to opiates, or say you have a criminal background check and you wouldn't pass it. And I'm not talking about traffic violations, but that's where I'd be careful. And that's where, like with me, I bring my own team in sometimes that are independent contractors. I don't just do a criminal background check once. I have several criminal background checks and other checks. I also check their credit. They know this. I pay for it. But I want people to know that just because you do whatever it takes to get a job with me, that doesn't mean your job's guaranteed forever. But that's just, I guess that's the former banker in me. When I saw people that had gambling addictions that were hired by banks that I worked for, that it was too dangerous for them to be in front of a cash drawer. And I can't tell you how many walked out, Melissa, with $15,000-$20,000 knowing they wouldn't be prosecuted.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot, and I think that you really laid it out in a methodical way on kind of really to prepare ahead of time, to do your homework and to gather information and make the best decision for each individual based on their interests, quality of life, things that are important, and to, really look into the community on a few different occasions, not just a one-time visit where they may roll out the red carpet for you.
Yep.
And then also the negotiation of the entrance fee. I've never heard of that. And I would imagine most people have never heard of it. And as you said earlier, families are often thrown into these situations to make a quick decision where they're not going to do these types of looking into the options and making that best choice.
Yeah.
So it's very important. So thank you so much
And it's
for
my pleasure.
sharing this.
And we'll schedule a senior living 102.
Yep.
Because then we'll get into the nitty-gritty and what happens when it's not your decision. There are still a few things you can do. But it'll also help if you're one of the 10%, some other things to consider. But more importantly, like I would just leave you with, some of the things that you said, but please, it's kind of like when you look at a house and you don't want to say, oh, I'm putting in an offer until you talk to your realtor and you think, oh, well, then I find out that, yeah, there were issues at this address or different things when you do your due diligence, or yeah, they had a fire and they didn't disclose it, or certain things like that. The other thing I would recommend is just know that this is overwhelming. It's kind of like moves are very, very stressful, even in the best of times, even if you're moving to the cruise ship. It's kind of like death or a divorce. It is very stressful. So give yourself grace, give your decision maker grace, and take your time. But please try to make this your own decision. Don't drag it out. And if you can't bring yourself to decide on a facility, at least prepare to the best of your ability. Because what happens is if, and we'll get into this with Senior Living 102, but say, Melissa, something happens to you. You and your loved one are in a serious accident. You're your loved one's decision maker, but you're unconscious when decisions have to be made. And I think we've talked about this previously. And they need to put your loved one, they need to get him or her help. And it starts with a rehab. And it's the rehabs that have the space available, not necessarily the one you want. And then that rehab can decide, okay, now that it's time for them, they can't live on their own. They need to go into assisted living, a CCRC, or whatever you want to call it. And then you can only go with who's available. And what if this accident, heaven forbid, happens in May or June, one of the high times where they have all these move-ins? You're not getting the best of the best. You might have the choice that you decided long ago you would never move into. And what happens when you really don't have negotiating power, because they know that they're the only game in town and that they're the only ones currently without a bed. And the last thing I'll leave you with is find the places that have waiting lists. Not many places have waiting lists. I have a client in a community now that they have a waiting list, and we're just using them for respite care right now, but I'm praying that we get in there. But we can only use respite care for so long, which has now given her a taste of this community that she's like, I want to be here. And I'm like, I'm doing my best. But they have a waiting list. So you might not have the negotiating power, but is it the best place for you? But in come January, would you have more negotiating power? Most likely, because we know that's the time. So, but thank you,
Holly,
Melissa. It's always a pleasure. I know I went a little bit over. It's a little more than 1 hour for anyone listening to this, but I hope you find it helpful. If there are topics that you would like Melissa and or I to talk about, or to have someone, please reach out to Melissa and let her know. She is the boss lady for all of us. But we're grateful. We're grateful to have you as part of our group. We hope you enjoy this. And just do your homework, do your due diligence, and do the stuff that's tough. It's like ripping off the Band-Aid. You'll be grateful once you do it.
And Holly, if you can tell people how they can reach you, if
Yes.
they have questions about what you've shared,
Yep.
if they have concerns about things you've shared, yeah, if you can just share how they can reach you and perhaps follow through in some way to gather more information that might really make a difference for the quality of their loved one or themselves.
You can reach me at mobile, MOBILE, McDonald @gmail.com. You can also, there's a link on the Club 62 website, but if you Google Hollie, HOLLIE, McDonald, McDonald, Substack, one word, SUBSTACK, you'll have access to my column. I'm sorry, that's the dog. You'll have access to my column. Forgive me. Of course,
okay.
It's at the very end of my Zoom. But you have access to my column about senior living and some of these things that you need to do, and just some ideas. So once again, mobile, MOBILE, McDonald @gmail.com. And then if you want to check me out on Substack, just do a check of your favorite search engine, Hollie McDonald. It's spelled in the bottom of your screen with my little headshot, Substack. And you can subscribe for free to my newsletter. But feel free to reach out if you have questions. I will also always answer a question first, but if you get into more questions, we'd have to discuss that. because I get a lot of questions already, as you can imagine. But I am happy to answer questions one off. I will never make recommendations because I don't want my bias. Say I didn't have a great experience with one type of community, that doesn't mean that you won't, and you might love it. So I will never say, oh, I prefer this type of community over another one, because you might have a much better experience than I did. Or what if the community that I really love is not so hot in your area? I don't want to do that. So please, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice in any way. And any opinions are mine alone, not of Club 62 or any of the contributors on the website. But I hope that you find them helpful. And I hope that whenever you watch this, you have a great rest of your day or evening. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Holly. It's been so informative, and I know it'll help a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye now.
Bye.